Hello, this is Justin Williams with the Wolfpacker podcast. I'm joined today by a well-rested Mike Rose coming off of the bye week, just like NC State. And we're going to break down NC State's heartbreaking 44-41 loss to number 11 Miami Hurricanes on Friday night in Carter Finley Stadium. But before we get too far into this episode, this podcast is brought to you in part by JFQ Lending. With interest rates below 3%, there has never been a better time to lock in a low fixed interest rate on your mortgage. You'll never need to think about refinancing again. Set it and forget it. And with JFQ Lending, you are guaranteed to get the highest level of customer service. They have an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and over 3,000 five-star reviews. Give Hunter Clausen a call today at 480-513-3992 or email Hunter directly at hclausen@jfqlending.com. That's HCLAUSSEN@jfqlending.com. JFQ Lending, Inc., Equal Access Lender, licensed in over 40 states, www.jfqlending.com. And while you're at it, go over to thewolfpacker.com and use promo code PACK60 for a free 60-day trial on all of our premium news, content, and analysis. That's promo code PACK60. Gets you free 60 days, and we're now almost 2 weeks away from men's basketball season. We got 4 more regular season games in the football year. And also we're going to have a bye game or a bowl game to look forward to sometime December. So depending on how NC State finishes out its 4-game stretch here with 3 of them at home to end the 2020 regular season, we will find out where they'll be heading in the postseason. But we're going to have to talk about Friday's game here first. That's why we're here. That's why we've got Mike on. So, Mike, it was a very well-fought game, I thought, by the Wolfpack. Really were the better team for, I would say, 3/4 of that game, and that's not to discount Miami. I thought, they may have started a little bit slower than they wanted, but all in all, is a fantastic game for D'Eriq King, Miami's quarterback. He really stole the show. Over 400 yards passing, over 100 yards rushing, scores all 5 of Miami's touchdowns. And even despite, the Heisman-esque type performance that we witnessed from King on Friday, NC State still had enough to, they should have beaten Miami in my opinion.
For sure.
And it was with their backup quarterback, redshirt junior Bailey Hockman, who had a great game. We're going to get into that. We're also still missing Tanner Engel on defense, which, clearly I think proved to be a tough loss for NC State, one that they really wanted to get back. But all in all, the defense played well at times. They made some stops, not all the stops needed. But, when you play a quarterback like D'Eriq King, you're not expecting a shutout. You're just looking to outscore the opponent. And, I think really the story of this game and where I want to start is the NC State offense, which was clearly showed a lot of positive signs. And I think just lost a little bit of gas there in the fourth quarter. But Mike, what were your main takeaways specifically on offense? But, leaving that game, how are you feeling?
As I've said, Kerry Angeline, when he scores, you usually win. Now, that didn't happen, but you scored a lot of points. There is a correlation, and I keep trying to tell people he is the key in that offense to me, opening up the pass game, especially for a guy like Bailey Hockman. I think the offense came to play. They came to play. They fought. They did what they had to do. And the OC put Hockman in a situation where he couldn't fail. And I think that's what you have to do. And I think that you really experienced a good balance of the run and the pass. They got him incorporated. They threw the little swing back to him and he ran for a touch. I think that getting him involved more with running the ball and throwing is what we needed to do. In Miami, they had a tough time holding Bailey Hockman back from just making plays.
Yeah, I think that's a really great assessment. Credit to offensive coordinator Tim Beck for putting Hockman in the right spots to be successful. He had a great night. He finishes completing 19 of 28 passes for 248 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns, did have the interception on the last drive, which, kind of like Ben Finley in the last game, could he have given a better throw? Maybe, but it was more of a better effort by a defensive lineman getting up there, swatting the ball and tipping it, and then causing the Miami turnover there, which was really the nail in the coffin. NC State did have an opportunity there with less than 3 minutes to go to go drive down the field and potentially get a game tying field goal or even a game winning touchdown. But it just didn't happen for NC State. Miami made one more play. Before we dive into Hockman and the specifics, because I really want to touch on your point about Kerry Angeline, it was very pleasing to see him get more involved in this game than he had in the past couple. I think fans get emotionally involved in these games, and then they kind of feel like, oh no, well, it's going to lose the rest of the season. It's going to carry over to a few more games. But I think quite the opposite for this game. I think this should give this NC State team plenty of confidence moving forward, because it showed that they have a recipe for success. I mean, Miami was the number 11 team in the country. You could debate whether they were a little bit overrated going into that matchup or not. Only time will tell. But the fact of the matter is NC State was right there with Miami throughout the game. The offense was looking really good. There's still some improvement needed on the defensive side of the ball. Some of that is based on injuries and personnel, which will also improve itself as the year goes along. I failed to mention, but Drake Thomas was another guy, another big presence for NC State that was absent on Friday night. So you lose one of your best linebackers in Drake Thomas. You lose arguably your most valuable player on the defense this year with the depth in the secondary and junior safety Tanner Engel. And, the fact that they were still able to make some stops was I thought pretty good. From your experience as a player, I mean, it's a tough loss. It's one that they're probably thinking they should have come away with a win in. But does a game like this give the team confidence moving forward, or is it something that they'll dwell on moving ahead in the last 4 games?
I think the biggest thing is, you don't want to create division when the offense plays well and the defense doesn't. You want to make sure that it's all about the team, because I will say this: offense and special teams came to play. Mm-hmm. Those 2 units came to play. The defense, we do have a lot of young people who shouldn't be playing this year. It is what it is, flat out. But they're playing and they're getting games under their belt, which will help for the future. But if we're talking about right now, my biggest thing is, like I saw a play, it was 3rd and short or 4th and short, and the back, the quarterback pulls it and runs to the right and gets a gigantic gain. That's an experience thing for young linemen and young linebackers. You have to know if he's their best weapon and it's 3rd and short, 4th and short, he's not handing that ball off. Right. And that just comes with experience, and that comes with time and knowing your opponent. And that just comes from film study. The coaches probably told them in that situation that it might happen, but in that situation, you can't let that happen. And that happened too often. Too often did you see, personnel mismatches on 3rd and 4th that shouldn't be there. And I have said I wasn't a fan of the defense schematically, but at the end of the day, every defense has rules that make it to where they can stop almost anything. Right. So in this defense, I think the guys need to get a better understanding of the defense so little things like that don't happen. Because if you take away those little minor things and you get rid of, 3 to 4 first downs they get per game, then it goes from 44 to 30. And then as you get better, 30 to 25, if they could stop them twice, honestly, if they stopped them 2 to 3 times more than they actually did, this is a completely different game.
Oh, 100%. And, Dave Dorn admitted it after the game. It was just a matter of 2 teams competitively fighting for 4 quarters. And at the end of the game, Miami just made one more play than NC State was able to make. And, that happens. NC State had won a couple of those games early on in the season. They won the game against Wake Forest. They won the game at Pittsburgh in similar fashion to where, Pittsburgh and Wake Forest had plenty to talk about. They had opportunities to win. NC State made the plays at the end. So I'm not worried about the resolve of this team. This team is knocking on the door. I still see it as a team that is ahead of schedule, is exceeding expectations entering this year. And you mentioned the defensive personnel. There's a lot of guys in there that, true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, sophomores that are playing a little bit before would be ideal, but it's not a matter of want. It's a matter of necessity at this point in COVID year 2020. But let's start with the main positive, I think, for NC State fans to take away moving forward for these last 4 games here. Bailey Hockman was phenomenal. on Friday night. Any of the questions about his arm or his poise, I think he answered them with his production on the field on Friday night. He threw several great passes throughout the game. I mean, I think in the fourth quarter, the play calling became more conservative. They were trying to run the ball, which I don't necessarily think was the wrong decision. You just have to be able to move the sticks in those. Right. You really, ideally, if they get 2 more first downs there on that last possession instead of having to punt, then we're talking about a different outcome. And nobody's talking about the conservative play calling down the stretch. I mean, NC State was beating a top 15 team at home with probably less talent than the other team had. So you got to shorten the game. You got to drain that clock. But Hockman, great passes, even gets involved in the receiving game, that 31-yard touchdown. It was the first of the night on the trick play with Thayer Thomas, who finally gets his first passing touchdown of the season. Now 3 straight years where he's found the end zone as a quarterback. But it was great to see Hockman have a game like that. And I think that's something that's going to give him a ton of confidence to finish out the stretch here for the last 4 games and potentially, give NC State a chance to have an 8-win season. There's 4 very winnable games left on this schedule.
No, I definitely think there are some games that can be had. They could win them all. To be fair, there's been a tough stretch. It's been a tough stretch, even with the bye weekend. There's been a tough stretch. And I think that confidence, should be running higher because of the fact you're missing so many people. It's a COVID year. I get it. A lot has happened, but at the end of the day, you got a winning record. And, a lot of people can't say that, at the end of the day. And, in a year where some teams aren't playing, some teams are doing this, you're being competitive and you're pushing. And at the end of the day, it only takes one time for you to beat Miami, Carolina, or Pittsburgh, and people have to show you more respect. And the more competitive they are, eventually, these games will turn the other way. It's like 2 boxers slugging it out. Eventually, you'll get that punch that puts you over the edge. But for right now, you're taking your learning. You're taking your hits, so they're learning. This is a big learning process in a situation where these guys they didn't have the time to know they'd be playing. So defensively, it's tough to watch sometimes, but you just have to remember that these guys are fresh out of high school, probably would have been redshirted in most cases, and they're having to start on a Division I program playing against 5th-year seniors.
Exactly right.
Every week.
And there's not another De'Aaron King waiting on this schedule for the Wolfpack in the last 4 games. I mean, De'Aaron King followed by Sam Howell a couple weeks ago. I mean, that 2-game stretch there for NC State, that's the best quarterbacks that they're going to see all season long. An opportunity waiting for them next week at home against Florida State. I also want to talk about the receiving corps because I thought they played a really solid game. It was very nice to see Caroline Angeline get involved. I think a lot of fans and media spectators that cover NC State closely have always kind of scratched their head as to why he hasn't gotten more involved in some of these games because of just how efficient he is. 4 targets, 4 receptions, catches all of his targets, 54 yards and a touchdown. And, frankly, I think they could have gone to him a little bit more considering how well he was playing. And Emeka Emezi steps up and has another big game. Couple great catches on 30-plus yard receptions. There was a 34-yard connection between him and Bailey Hockman that I thought was very impressive. He finishes the night with 4 receptions for 95 yards, leading the Wolfpack yet again in the receiving corps. And many of the other guys stepped up too. I thought Porter Rooks had a nice game. Thayer Thomas had a nice game. Devin Carter as well. But just now that we see the blueprint for success with Hockman under center, I mean, I'm just going to step aside and let you have your moment to tell everyone, to tell all of our listeners, I told you so about Carrie Angeline.
That's a draft pick, man. I think that kid's a draft pick. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. I think that kid's a big body. He blocks. He does what he's told, and the kid runs his routes, and he catches the ball. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm a fan of speed and agility and juking and all that. If he catches the ball, he can play for me. And that at the end of the day, that's the big thing, with wide receivers coming out today. They can do a lot, but can they catch the football? And this tight end, this young man can catch the football. He gets open, he sits in zone, and he catches touchdowns. And for a young quarterback, you need a reliable guy just because eventually they're gonna start doubling him if he's the guy that's making all the catch. Good thing Hockman's spraying it around.
Right.
But eventually, defenses do catch on, and they're gonna be like, all right, well, he's gonna go to Emezi. We'll take Emezi away. Kerry Angeline's right there for you. Because he's a mismatch. He's a big guy who can move. That's always a mismatch for defenses, especially since they're getting smaller these days.
And his presence really shows up when you look at NC State's efficiency in the red zone. Yet another game where they scored all four of their red zone trips on Friday night. And when you have a 6'5" target that's got great hands up the middle and inevitably seems to continue to find ways to be open. I mean, I just don't know how opposing defenses haven't caught on that you can't leave a 6'5" tight end with good hands wide open up the middle. But you got to take the opportunities that are presented to you. Before we close out on the offense, I do want to talk about the running game. I thought it took a step forward from the last couple of contests. However, wasn't quite enough. In the preview for this game against Miami, I said the magic number for NC State is going to be 130 rushing yards. Can they get over 130 rushing yards? If they can, I think they're going to have a chance to win this game. Maybe not at the end, but they'll be in it down to the wire. And guess what? They had 131 rushing yards and knocked on the door, almost beat Miami, just a little bit short. And had they been able to pick up, let's say 150, I think it would have been a different outcome, particularly in the fourth quarter. Miami just really turned up their run defense. Miami's got a great defensive line with Silvera and Roche. But those guys just stepped up in the fourth quarter. Before that, I saw Ricky Person and Zonovan Bam Knight doing their thing. I don't think it was Bam's best game on the ground. Some of his opportunities were just blow-ups up front. He didn't have much of an opportunity to run, but when he did have a gap, he picked up 9 or 10 yards basically every time. And then Ricky Person had a nice little run there for 40 yards. I believe it was in the first half, but either way, you would have liked to see maybe a little bit more production out of the run game, particularly in the fourth quarter. But all in all, I thought it was a solid outing by the backs and something that we'll see more of in the next 4 games.
I can agree. I think they ran the ball effectively enough to win the game. Mm-hmm. I think some of those rushing yards got cut out by Bam Knight with the kick return touchdown. That probably took away a few of those rushing yards.
Right.
But I will say that these guys are running tough, and they're being asked to do a lot. They're being asked to pass block. They're being asked to catch the ball more than any other. Backs are being asked to do a lot these days more than they used to. So I think these guys are doing a good job. I just like the fact that Bailey Hockman got 7 attempts. I know he only got 7 yards.
Yeah.
But that opens up the door for Person and Knight to get more yards down the road. I like the offensive game plan. I think it was consistent. It was conservative at the end, but at the end of the day, you could take an aggressive approach and lose too. Like, I think that they're opening the door and they're opening the playbook for Hockman to succeed. And I think it's just different for Hockman now that he's not looking over his shoulder. It's a totally different feeling when you're not looking over your shoulder. It makes, especially for a quarterback, it can help him relax.
Well, totally agree with your assessment there. I mean, you got to mention with Hockman, a couple of those yards lost come on sacks because Miami's defensive line. I thought NC State did a really nice job on its offensive line. Its offensive line had a nice night considering how elite this Miami front is. Miami's still going to get theirs at the end of the day, even if your offensive line plays lights out. But Hockman had that 114-yard run. I believe it was in the red zone for a first down, which was really impressive. It was nice to see him get involved in the run department. And it was now his second game where he netted positive yards in the run game, the only other being Wake Forest, which I thought now becomes his second best game of the year. I think this was clearly not only the best game of his season, but the best game of his career thus far at NC State. And not to mention, it was nice to see Person and Knight get involved again in the pass game. Both of them come down with at least one reception. Person had 2 for 10 yards. Knight had 1 for 5. Love seeing them get involved in the pass game. And I liked the division or ratio of run to pass in the play calling, 35, I think, rushing attempts compared to 29 pass attempts. I think that's your recipe for success with Hawkman under center. You got to find a way to get the run game going. Sometimes that involves him directly, and just give him, easy, efficient mid-level throws and let your playmakers make plays. And that's exactly what happened on Friday night. But let's talk about the defense. Obviously, Miami was able to score 3 more points than NC State at the end. Aleem McNeil, another great game up the middle. He finishes with a really good, strong PFF grade, which you can check out on the wolfpacker.com. We're going to have all of the Pro Football Focus game grades on there for premium subscribers. So a great opportunity to take advantage of that Pack 60 promo deal for a free 60-day trial on the wolfpacker.com. But I thought the defensive line played well. They were able to come away with 2 sacks, 5 tackles for loss, which just about matched Miami's performance. So if you can match what Miami was doing, and we know Miami's got a good defensive line, it was a nice job up front. But at the end of the day, I think the absence of Drake Thomas and the absence of Tanner Engel was just a little bit too much for this Wolfpack defense to handle with De'Aaron King having a night.
One-on-one coverage is what we're struggling with. So I saw I think it was Harley or whatever for Miami, that one-on-one coverage deep, those young DBs, Pierre Lewis and all those guys, they just have to come, you got to win your 50-50s. Like at the end of the day, we lost more 50-50s than we won, and they won more 50-50s than they lost. That's just how that goes. And I think that at the end of the day, they were there in position.
Right.
So I can't, if I was a DB coach, I'd be like, listen, we got to refine some things. But at the end of the day, sometimes the ball's just better than the coverage. And a lot of those situations, that's where it was. Sometimes he just comes down with it. That's just part of playing defense. You live to fight another day. But I mean, you just got to win more in one-on-one coverage. I think the linebackers, they flew around like they do. I think Moore had a decent one. Wilson had a decent one. Those guys are flying around. They're being competitive. The thing is, when it comes to the run game, those edge guys, which we've had a trouble on the edge. We have had a trouble no matter who's playing on the edge. And when it comes to those edge quarterback runs, they're hard to defend. I understand that. But everybody in college is doing it, so everybody has to defend it. It's been going on for ever. And now it's getting into the NFL. So the biggest thing is you have to be able to play the dive and the quarterback, and with the read option. And these guys, that's why the defensive ends are getting smaller, because they have to be able to play both. And then you got linebackers coming down, and these guys have to know that De'Aaron King, being who he is, he wouldn't be who he is if he didn't pull it more than he handed it off.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it just comes with experience and knowing your opponent. And you do have to play within the defense. So I know there's no defensive coordinator in the world who's going to say, all right, we're all just going to go for the dive and leave the quarterback open. Somebody has that young man, especially when he's that talented. So that being said, somebody's just got to make those plays. The read option has hurt us, because we got to do a better job playing the quarterback. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it is what it is. We got to win our one-on-ones at every spot. Every spot. We got to start doing better in one-on-ones.
Well, despite the end result, Miami was able to gain over 600 total yards of offense. You can't ever, give an A or B grade to a defense if they're going to give that many yards up. But I still think there are several positive things to take away from Friday night. First and foremost, NC State went into this game with a clear game plan of, we're just going to make King throw the deep ball. We don't think he can do it. And we're going to live and die by that. And you know what? King stepped up, rose to the occasion.
No, for sure.
And he proved him wrong. And he had a great night. Mike Harley was lights out, 150 yards. I think 8 receptions, 2 of them for touchdowns. Credit to Miami's receivers. They were quick. They were athletic. They probably played their best game of the year, because I know entering the game, a lot of, Miami media was questioning the receiving core. But, Miami's offense completely centered around King. But here are some of the positive things I would take away if I'm the NC State defense. One, I thought the experiment moving Tyler Baker-Williams, the starting nickel typically, moving him over to Tanner Ingle's spot in the secondary at safety, and then keeping Joshua Pierre-Louis, the true freshman, at nickel, who has performed well at that position throughout the year, even though he's one season removed from high school ball. I thought that was a really good decision, and one that they probably had to make out of necessity just based on the depth at safety. But it ended up working out. Tyler Baker-Williams had a great night at safety. I think he led NC State with 14 tackles on the night. It was also very nice to see redshirt junior and team captain, middle linebacker Isaiah Moore, have a nice game after, he struggled against Carolina, particularly in the run game, missed a few tackles. It was nice to see him get back involved. He finished the night with a sack, I think about 10 tackles or so. Wilson was flying around as well. But, I thought the defensive backs and the cornerbacks with Cecil Powell. I thought Cecil Powell had a great game. Malik Dunlap, maybe not one of his best games, but, I think he was injured there a little bit in the second half. And then Shaheem Battle, made some good stops as well. I mean, look, I know we're exhausting this excuse, and it is what it is at the end of the day, but it's a very, very young secondary, and they're going through the learning motions. And I think if you're an NC State fan, you say that performance on Friday night is good enough to win you these last 4 games. If NC State can replicate that performance that they had against Miami, if they can wake up for these last 4 games, NC State will finish the season 8-3, and that exceeds every expectation that anyone had entering this season. And it sets up very nicely for next season, when you're going to get pretty much all of these guys back. I mean, aside from Aleem McNeil, who will be draft eligible, and I think he's gone.
Hit.
That's a big hit. But, if there was a department where I think NC State can afford to lose a guy, it might be at nose tackle. CJ Clark had a really great game as well on Friday. He's waiting in the wings. And then they've got a true freshman in Davin Van, who's another athletic freak in the making. Give him another offseason with Coach Thunder and expect good results from him in the future. But all in all, I think this year is about building for the future and finishing a great opportunity that you have in front of you. And I don't suspect that NC State's going to continue to give up 620 yards of total offense in these last 4 games. We're not talking about the same offenses moving forward. Now, Liberty's sneaking up. That's coming on the schedule. We're 2 weeks away from that. That'll be one to watch, because they're going to be a ranked opponent when they come into Carter Finley Stadium. Something that a lot of people didn't suspect. But all in all, would you have liked the defense to make a few more stops than they did? Yes. But really, we wouldn't even be talking about most of the defensive troubles had NC State just made that 1 3rd and 7 stop at the end of the game. Miami was down, 4 points at that point. They had 3rd and long situation. They were 2 plays away. You take away the ball from Miami at that point, NC State's icing the game at that point. But Mike Harley gets free on a slant route, goes off for a touchdown, and that was pretty much the ball game after NC State intercepted it. But, any other takeaways on the defense before we turn to special teams and give out our game balls, Mike?
I think a lot of those guys are exhausted. They're playing special teams and they're playing defense.
Yep.
And they're young, mentally probably just bouncing all over the place during the game. And these are young 18, 19-year-olds playing against 22, 23-year-old guys who've been in the program for a while. So I'm not a big excuse guy. I will say you do have to give the DBs the benefit of the doubt. No other position besides the DBs in my position, to me, deserve the benefit of the doubt. The rest of these guys have played a little bit. That's why the linebackers, I think they continually do well because, they're a seasoned group. Drake Thomas definitely could have helped on a lot of those things. He definitely is a difference maker. And I think the D-line, they didn't have their best game. But at the same time, they're still getting some pressure on the quarterback. I know T. Dawkins had a half. And I know Baker Williams had a half, even though he's not a D lineman. But, I think Joseph's doing well.
Mm-hmm.
I think these guys are slowly putting it together in a season where it seems like everything's been accelerated. It just seems like because they were 3-2-0 or 3-0, and everybody's like, oh, now the expectation shouldn't be any higher. I said, never brag on a baby. Just take it one day at a time and see what happens, because right now they're over 500. And
Right.
I don't think it's a time to panic, because if they get to 6 wins, that's more than let's be honest, more than any of us thought that was going to happen anyway. So, exactly. And if they split this, they get 6 wins. And you know what? To me, that's a solid comeback season.
Absolutely.
Especially with half your roster decimated or COVID listed. So if you look at it this way, yeah, if everybody was healthy, you never know. But this is what you got.
Well, it's certainly a game of what ifs. Look, if we're sitting here, NC State's 5-2, they just come off a win over number 11 Miami. I mean, it's the makings of a very special season at that point.
It's a different conversation.
But, it's going to have to wait until next year. Still a lot to play for NC State. And we have to give the special teams credit. Great 53-yard connection by Chris Dunn. It's awesome to see a Wolfpack kicker getting it done, getting his moment. He went viral on social media for his groin thrust celebration, if you will, after the 50 bomb on the kick, and well deserved there. And then of course we'd be failed to miss Zonovan Knight's 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown, which was very impressive. He admitted after the game it was probably a ball that he shouldn't have taken out of the end zone. They typically don't, but now he becomes the 4th player in NC State history to have a kickoff return for 100 or more yards. The only player to do it twice in an NC State uniform is now playing in the NFL, Nyheim Hines, who will be playing for the Colts later this evening. But with that said, I'd give the special teams an A Friday night. I'd give that offense a solid B+, and they were 1 quarter short of an A+. And, I think I'd still give the defense a C- because, look, they executed the game plan. The game plan just fell short at the end of the day, but, they stuck to it, and De'Aaron King made them pay. So that was that. Any other thoughts before we give out our game balls, Mike? You can jump right into it if you want.
I think that people have to understand on defense, it's an effort to get to the ball within a scheme and a strategy. So I will say this. I think that the D coordinator, whoever that is, I don't know who he is. I will say that he's trying. I see that he's trying, and he's doing his best to put these guys in the best position. You have to work with what you have. And when you have young guys, you have to limit the playbook. You have to. You can't go in there with, these exotic blitzes and stuff like that, because those guys, you got to keep it simple. So, I get it. But if I'm going to do my game ball, I'm going to give it to the entire special teams unit. The kickoff return unit, man, the field goal unit, those guys did their thing. They're working hard. They're battling. And at the end of the day, if you can play well on special teams, then guys have to check that tape out. A lot of coaches, I'm like, man, I don't care about special teams. But if you force them to watch that tape, you force them to try to stop you, which that's extra points.
Yeah, we've seen NC State win multiple games this season based on special teams plays. So it's important. It's nice to see NC State having a really solid year on special teams, not just in the kicking department. We knew going into the season, Trenton Gill's one of the better punters in the ACC. Chris Dunn's one of the better place kickers in the ACC. But Thayer Thomas is also up there in his punt returns, and the guys blocking are getting it done. As you mentioned, they're getting not only asked to get it done on special teams, but they're also getting asked to do it on the defensive and offensive ends of the ball. And they've got to be exhausted. So credit to them. I think that's a great game ball. And just for the record, defensive coordinator Tony Gibson. And I agree with you. I think he is doing his best. He's mixing things up. I don't think he's been stubborn at all in not trying to make things work that just haven't this year. He has been flexible. He has changed game plans around. based on the reactions of things. So it was a better tackling performance for sure by NC State, but at the end of the day, your players still have to execute, and that's not something that he can necessarily control. So he's making the best of what he has, and it's a talent pool that is going to continue to grow here, I think, for the rest of the season and also leading into 2021. But I got to give my game ball to, I think, the number one guy that deserves it, a guy that I had been slightly critical of over the past 2 or 3 weeks. Not to say I was anti this guy. I was just a little bit more in favor of starting his potential substitute, Mr. Bailey Hockman. He had himself a game. He made several great throws. He proved that he can get it done through the air. He proved that he can get it done on the ground. And he also went, 57 minutes of the game without throwing an interception or having a single turnover. So credit to Bailey Hockman. Not an easy position for him to come into after the bye week, play this high key game, a nationally televised game on a Friday night, in a game where, look, these guys are all on social media. They see what's going on, and I'm sure he knew as good as anybody else that a lot of NC State fans, myself included, I'll put myself right in that camp. I thought Ben Finley was the guy moving forward. And you know what? That's why Dave Dorn and Tim Beck and they make the big bucks to make these decisions, and it proved to be the right one. Hockman looked great. I hope that this play continues. As long as we continue to see the performance that we saw against Wake Forest and in this game and in really the second half of the Carolina game from Hockman, NC State's a very competitive team that can win a lot of games. So credit to him. I was very impressed with him. I thought it was great to see it after all the adversity that he's gone through and the letdown and just the ups and downs with, his battle with Leary and this weird COVID 2020 season. Bailey Hockman gets my game ball. And before you guys tune off, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you listen to us. We're on Spotify now, so you can download us on there. We're on Apple Podcast app, Google Play. Of course, you can always listen to it on our streaming service on thewolfpacker.com. While you're on thewolfpacker.com, please be sure to use promo code PACK60 for a free 60-day trial on all of our premium news content and analysis. On social media, follow us on Twitter. You can follow Mike at SavageMike90 on Twitter. You can follow me personally at Justin H. Will, and also be sure to follow our main account at the Wolfpacker. It's at the Wolfpacker on Twitter. Like us on Facebook, NC State Wolfpack on thewolfpacker.com. And I think that about does it, Mike. For Mike Rose, this is Justin Williams, and this has been the Wolfpacker Podcast.